Alaska's Brooks Range, north of the Arctic Circle, in the summer of 1958. The Suez Crisis and turmoil in Iran, the latter partially engineered by the Central Intelligence Agency, had made plain to BP's executives that their oil holdings in the Middle East were politically insecure. Alaska's storm-swept seas and icy glaciers might look forbidding, but at least they were situated in a nation that welcomed private capital. American government surveys had suggested for years that Alaska's north was rich with oil and natural gas. BP was among the first of the major international oil companies to bear the uncertainties of the harsh climate and invest. By the early 1970s, it had established a large position as a leaseholder on Alaska's North Slope. Transport was the major obstacle to maximized profits in a region iced over for months at a time. Oilmen had talked for years about wild-eyed schemes to build an overland pipeline from the Arctic to the south, but the project would require money and political alignments that seemed preposterously ambitious. Only another Middle Eastern crisis, the oil embargo of 1973, directed by Arab producers at the United States over its support of Israel, at last spurred construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System to carry crude 800 miles from Prudhoe Bay across permafrost to the ice-free port of Valdez. To finance and operate the pipeline, BP formed a consortium with Exxon's precursor Humble Oil and Atlantic Richfield. The first oil flowed in June and reached the Valdez Marine Terminal on July 28, 1977. A dozen years later, it poured through Valdez at a rate of about 2 million barrels per day, an amount equal to more than a quarter of all of America's domestic crude oil production. The Valdez terminal had grown into a labyrinth of pipes, oval storage tanks, and strings of festive-looking white safety lights, an improbable man-made installation tucked on a rise amid snow-draped mountain crags and majestic glaciers. Tankers as long as several football fields passed to and from the docks one after another. The Coast Guard funneled them through a 10-mile-wide shipping lane in Prince William Sound, an inland sea teeming with salmon, halibut, whales, seals, sea lions, porpoises, and sea otters. Inbound traffic traveled in a corridor to the east, outbound traffic to the west. That Thursday, the Brooklyn and the Arco Juneau had departed Valdez for the Pacific only hours before Hazelwood embarked with a load of 1,264,155 barrels of crude. It was a misty night, but the winds were light, the seas were calm, and visibility extended 8 miles. Hazelwood had navigated this passage at least 100 times before. He returned to the bridge shortly after 11 p.m. His Valdez port pilot had disembarked, and a tugboat escort had also peeled away. Bligh Island now lay ahead to the southeast, shaped in the water like a sleeping crocodile with a curling snout. To the island's west, a red light pulsed every 4 seconds to mark Bligh Reef, which spread beneath the surface at between 1/4 and 9 fathoms. The draft of a loaded oil tanker could be 10 fathoms or more. White icebergs from the Columbia Glacier bobbed ahead as well, visible to eye and radar, and several of them now appeared to block the outbound shipping lane. Hazelwood decided on a common maneuver, one taken earlier without incident by the 2 ships ahead of him. The Exxon Valdez would turn south across the inbound shipping lane toward Busby Island near Bligh, evade the ice, and then turn back to the outbound corridor toward the Hinchinbrook entrance and the open sea. The captain radioed the Coast Guard's Vessel Traffic Service to secure permission. "Judging by our radar, I will probably divert and end up in the inbound lane if there's no conflicting traffic. Over," he announced. The Coast Guard's monitors did not question him. One of the men on duty was on a coffee break. In any event, it was not as if he or anyone else in the Coast Guard could easily track the Exxon Valdez's movements once it reached the vicinity of Bligh. Budget cuts during the 1980s had left the Vessel Traffic Service without a radar system that could follow ships reliably once they moved 30 or more miles south of Valdez. Even if the Coast Guard had possessed such radar, it might not have mattered. Blood tests administered later to the 2 men on duty showed traces of marijuana and alcohol. Regulators and the regulated had fallen into a slothful embrace, reflecting a national political atmosphere that emphasized